car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Welcome. This is The Attorneys. I'm Art Franklin. On this episode of The Attorneys, we'll get into a legal process that can be the turning point in many lives. We're talking about expungement. It can erase or seal records from public view, but that process varies across jurisdictions. Who qualifies for expungement, and what does it really mean to really get that second chance? We'll get into all that and more. But as we get started, I'd like to remind you, there are attorneys at Hollis Wright standing by right now. We always do that at the beginning of the show to take your call. Call 1-844-LAW-TALK. You can reach an attorney at Hollis Wright. It is a free and confidential call, so go ahead and make that call right now. Carter Clay is with Hollis Wright. We have a very special guest with us today. It's Karen King, and we're going to learn more about her in just a moment. But this is a show that everyone really should be listening to.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got Catherine King here with us this evening, and we're going to be talking about expungement. And of course, Art, as you know, we've covered this a little bit on shows in a broader context related to criminal law matters. And there are many, many people out there that unfortunately made mistakes in their past. They commit a crime, and it stays with them forever, right? It haunts them. It affects their ability to get jobs. It affects relationships that they have. People kind of look at them differently from time to time, depending upon what they did wrong. And expungement is almost a way to start over. It gives people a fresh start. It can erase the record, so to speak, so that it's not in the public viewing or public purview. And it really is a good process that people need to consider. And Catherine King is going to talk with us about that here tonight and about the steps that people need to take if they qualify or are otherwise eligible to have their record expunged. So, Catherine, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, tell the viewers a little bit about you and your background and the nature of your law practice.
I'm Catherine King. I'm from Hoover originally. Went to University of Alabama, Birmingham School of Law, and I have been practicing criminal law basically since I started practicing in 2015. I can do a little bit of most things, but my focus is criminal law, and it is my passion.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting, but when I invited you to come on the show, we kind of opened it up to you to decide what topic that you wanted to cover, and you selected expungement. So obviously that's special to you, and I take it it's probably special to you because of what I said in the introduction, which is gives people a fresh start. People have made these mistakes in the past, but talk a little bit about why you personally wanted to talk about expungement tonight.
They're a great tool to help. I mean, they're not going to help everybody with a criminal conviction, but those that I can help with that, it can be hugely life-changing for them. It can open up new jobs, new opportunities that they otherwise would not have because of something in their past. Yeah. So it's I love second chances. I love new opportunities, and this is a way that I can help certain people with that.
Well, Art have given our sort of non-expertise definition of expungement. Well, why don't you give, what is sort of the legal definition of expungement in the criminal law setting?
So the legal definition is to seal or to destroy the record. And functionally to the public, that is what an expungement is going to do. That does not mean that the records are destroyed and gone forever. But as far as like the public purview or that type of thing, public background check, once you have an expungement done, even the entity that originally had those records do not have those records anymore. So.
Yeah, and I know this is a little bit different than expungement, but you'll know a lot about this, but it just oftentimes you see young people who commit crimes and they're treated differently. They go through the juvenile criminal process, and then you sort of get to the youthful offender type process where I believe if you're an adult but under 21, you're generally eligible for perhaps to have some crimes treated as youthful offender. And we also see sometimes, even if people are slightly over 21, they'll try and have their crimes pursued under youthful offender status. Talk a little bit about that and why those processes are helpful in a similar way to expungement.
Well, the youthful offender statute says under 21. I guess a court could make an exception for that if petitioned to do so, but the code says 21 and under, and really it's court's discretion to allow that defendant to have youthful offender even on pretty egregious charges. But effectively that caps the level of punishment, the level of fines that somebody can have when they're adjudicated as a youthful offender. So a youthful offender, it's a little bit nuanced. A youthful offender, it's not a conviction. It is an adjudication as a youthful offender, meaning it is not to be treated as a conviction because it's not a conviction. But it does seal the record, and the most jail time that somebody can get as a youthful offender is 3 years, and the most fines that somebody can get as a youthful offender would be $1,000 in fines. So it limits the amount of punishment they can receive, and it seals their record.
Yeah. Shifting back to expungement, how is that different than a pardon?
So a pardon is, if you want to think of it more like forgiveness, it does not absolve the person of their criminal acts. It takes away the punishment for the rest of it. So pardon is kind of a blanket term. A clemency could be a pardon that would fall under there. You could have a pardon and not have to finish out a prison sentence. You could have a pardon, and after you've finished your prison sentence but you can't vote, you can get pardoned and get restored your rights to vote.
You know, as I listen to that, I'm sure some of the viewers at home thinking the same things. Who's eligible for expungement, and then what types of crimes can be actually expunged?
Right. Okay. So to your question, the difference in an expungement is that wipes the slate clean, as opposed to forgiving it. So to have a charge that's capable of being expunged, you got to look at it a few different ways. There's lots of misdemeanors where you can have a conviction and still get it expunged. If you went through a pretrial diversion and the case was dismissed, or if the case was dismissed by some other means, those would be capable of being expunged. If you were just charged and not convicted under those, if there's very few felonies where a conviction would be able to be expunged, very few. But if you were charged with a felony offense under certain situations, if that case was dismissed, you can have that expunged. So that way you don't have the arrest on your record, and you don't even have the fact that there was a felony charge against you.
Which is why they need an expert like you.
It's nuanced.
That's exactly right. And I know we're about to go to a commercial break. We're going to continue to unpack this topic on the other side. But there are so many nuance and details about whether somebody is or is not eligible for an expungement. Somebody like Catherine can address those issues for somebody on the front end who's interested in it, can tell them what their rights are and how to go about it. So it's a great option for people to have.
So we're just getting started as we're talking about expungement on this episode of The Attorneys. We're so glad that you are joining us. I want to remind you to also follow Hollis Wright on all social media platforms, whether it's X, Instagram, or Facebook. You get a lot of great information there when we're not on the air, other information. Also find out some things about Hollis Wright and all the people involved in the firm. Remember, 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's the number you can call to reach someone at Hollis Wright right now for a free, confidential call. They are manning the phones. We do that throughout the show, so it's your time to go ahead and make that call. We're going to take a break as we're talking expungement. We'll continue here on The Attorneys. Stay with us.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Did you know a tractor trailer weighs upwards of 80,000 pounds and a car only weighs 4,000 pounds? Well, that's a big difference if you've been injured in an accident. Call us now. Our attorneys are standing by right now to help. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
And welcome back to The Attorneys as we discuss expungement, which is really life-changing for many people. And when we discuss this topic on The Attorneys, we also like to provide additional information for you. You'll see that information on the bottom of your screen. That's information that's very useful for the topic that we are discussing at the time. So we want to make sure you have that information as well. Also, there's a QR code on the screen as well. That is yet another way for you to reach someone at Hollis Wright. We try to make it very easy. If you have a question, you can reach them. As we're talking expungement now, I know we just got started, and we're going to continue to unpack this.
Yeah, the law related to expungement, Catherine, I know lays out or lists out various crimes that you absolutely are not eligible for having expungement even considered for you. Talk a little bit about what those crimes are so that the viewers will know.
Okay. Yes. So a DUI conviction or a conviction for a serious traffic crime, traffic offense. So reckless driving would be in that realm as well. There's various serious traffic offenses, but if there is a DUI conviction, there is no exception laid out that we can expunge that conviction. Not true for if that person went through a pretrial diversion and got the case ultimately dismissed. That would be, but not a conviction. Same with violent crimes. There's a litany of violent crimes that will not be a conviction, would not be ripe for expungement. If you have a CDL. If you picked up a traffic offense while holding a CDL, federal law says we cannot expunge that. There are other carve-outs though. Most felonies, short of a pardon, most felonies are not going to be. Convictions are not going to be able to be expunged.
Yeah, and one of the things that you've kind of mentioned, but I think it's worth mentioning again and not glossing over this, is that expungement can be just as useful, if I'm understanding you correctly, for individuals who were charged with a crime but not convicted.
Absolutely.
That it was dismissed, and I think there are a lot of people out there that were charged with a crime, maybe they were not convicted, maybe it was dismissed, but it's still on their record that they were charged, and it may be something that they're ashamed of, they're embarrassed about, and they want to have it removed completely. So this is an avenue for them as well.
Absolutely. So if a case has been dismissed, whether it be a felony or a misdemeanor, no matter what that crime was, there's going to be a chance to have that expunged. And that's really good because sometimes on background checks they want to see arrest records, even whether there was a conviction or not. Sometimes people get arrested for really egregious crimes that ultimately say that they were never indicted for, or the case gets dismissed for whatever reason, and they want that gone. They want to be as separated from that charge as they absolutely can be. And an expungement will do that for them.
Yeah, and I think it's important for the viewers also to understand this distinction, and I want you to talk a little bit about it. But basically, there are two separate court systems that people can be charged with a crime through: federal court and state court. What you're talking about, the avenue of expungement, would only apply to state court criminal actions and convictions. Is that correct?
That is correct. Expungements will, the process and what types of crimes are you're able to expunge is going to vary from state to state. And and I'm only knowledgeable on Alabama, of course, being only licensed in Alabama, but I do know that varies from state to state. And there is no federal statute that allows for an expungement of a federal crime. Okay. There's case law that I can only recall one case where a federal judge granted an expungement to a person in a federal matter where there was no conviction, but it's very, very rare, and there's no statute allowing for it.
So, Art, basically, you better have a good relationship with the president and maybe looking out for that pardon or something. I don't know. But.
Oh, absolutely. But or make sure you have a good relationship with Ms. King, because I listen to you, and we talk about how expungement can really be life-changing for so many people. But they're wondering, what's the process? How do you go through this process of expungement?
Okay, the process is a relatively simple one. The first step is the person seeking the expungement has got to go and have their fingerprints taken. Usually at the police station of the jurisdiction where they live will do that for them, or if they work in a certain jurisdiction, that police station there will take their fingerprints. There's a certain fingerprint card. I have a packet that explains all these things, and the types of agencies that you can go through to have your fingerprints taken. Those fingerprints, you send those in an application for your criminal history report. You send all that down to Montgomery. They send me back your criminal history, and then I can use that along with the petition to the circuit court in whatever county the conviction or the arrest was in, and we petition the court to expunge those records.
All right, and so when you say you petition the court, is that as simple as filing a motion, letting the court know, giving the background, the criminal conviction, the date, those types of details, and asking them to expunge it?
Correct. So, so there is a petition. There's an actual petition complaint that we file. There is a $500 filing fee, and that will, if there were several charges under one arrest, then the one filing fee will cover all of those petitions. So $500 filing fee, and we take that with your background, with your criminal history to the court, and basically that petition asks the circuit court to expunge this record. The various entities that have any kind of record of that arrest or of that charge have to be served. And then they file an answer in saying that they have no objection if everything is per the code, and it takes usually about 30 to 45 days after we file the petition to get an order. There
may be times where there are objections that are filed. We may want to talk about that a little bit after the break, but I do need to correct Catherine on one thing. She's being a little bit shy tonight. The first step actually in the process is to call Catherine King. She says she's got the packet ready for them, so why try and do it on your own? Call Catherine King. She's got the packet for them.
Absolutely, and also, if you have another question, call Hollis Wright. That number is 844-LAW-TALK. And they're standing by right now to take your call, a free, confidential call. Any question that you may have, concerns that you want to talk to an attorney at Hollis Wright, you can do that. We're talking expungement on this episode of The Attorneys. We're going to take a break. We got a little more to discuss, one more segment here. Stay with us. We will be back after this.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
Did you know we have nearly 100 five-star reviews on Google? That's because our clients like the work we do. If you've been injured in an accident, we are here to help. Give us a call for a free consultation. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys, and we're so glad that you are joining us as we're talking about the topic of expungement. We also don't want you to miss this opportunity to reach someone at Hollis Wright right now. Got a little bit more time. They stand by throughout the show to take your calls. It's free. It's confidential. It is 1-844-LAW-TALK. You can reach someone right now as we continue to start wrapping up this topic of expungement, very important to a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yeah, before we went to break, we started the process of talking about the process, and I think you laid it out. It seems pretty easy and straightforward, but you did mention something about the process involving objections. And you talked about how people could object to the request for an expungement. If there is an objection filed, in a general sense, what could the person expect to happen at that point?
Well, at least that's super rare. It's incredibly rare. As long as you fit the parameters, as long as the charge fits the parameters that are laid out in the code, it's very rare that something like that would happen. But if that were to happen, the judge would set a hearing date. Both sides could come in. I would come in and argue as to why it should be granted. Actually, no, the objecting party, since they're the one objecting, would actually come in first and explain to the judge why they believe that it should not be granted, and then I would come in and argue as to why it should, for whatever reason. That wouldn't. I cannot imagine that lasting any more than an hour, maybe, for whenever that would get set, and of course it would be set whenever the judge could hear it, whenever the judge would have time on their docket to get that in there and hear it. But thankfully that doesn't happen very often.
Doesn't happen very often, but if it does, then it would just be up to the court's discretion on whether or not they were going to grant the request or not.
It would be.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned a $500 filing fee.
Correct.
To get the process started, but obviously you charge for your services. In a general sense, whether it's you or just across the board, your colleagues that handle these types of expungement applications, what could somebody expect in terms of the legal fees associated with this? Anywhere
from $2,000 to $3,000. I usually try to keep it in the middle there, but typically between 2 to 3.
All right. Talk a little bit about, you go through the court process, the court grants the request for expungement. Procedurally and mechanically, what happens at that point to achieve the ultimate effect, which I guess is complete removal of these charges or convictions?
So ALEA, Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, will get a copy of the order as well as the city or the county where the charge happened. And they will get that order telling them to, the city, the county, wherever that was, they'll get the order telling them to send all of their records of that arrest to Alabama Law Enforcement Agency. Alabama Law Enforcement Agency will scan all of those records in and keep a digital archive of it for certain purposes, but otherwise, the city, the county, they are to have no more record of that. So it's deemed to have as if it never happened. So functionally, if Alabama Law Enforcement Agency doesn't send notice of that to the FBI, certainly we can send that to the FBI to where if it appeared on a background check, FBI background check before, we can get that removed from your FBI background check as well. Functionally, though, it is deemed as if it never existed, but there are certain entities, DHR and prosecutors, can see record of it in certain situations, but your regular background check, they're not going to be able to see it. You can say that you've never been arrested, you've never been charged with this. It's deemed to functionally act like that never happened.
So then that probably has a big impact on a person's employment process and
Absolutely.
also their civil rights even.
Yes, and that's really the main reason people want an expungement, is so that it increases their chances of getting a job, passing a background check. They don't have to explain something on their record that's embarrassing. That's the reason why a lot of people seek an expungement.
Yeah, and I thought it was important, something that you mentioned a minute ago. Of course, it's deemed removed or is removed from the public viewing, but there are certain law enforcement entities, maybe like the FBI, maybe like a prosecutor, maybe certain state law enforcement agencies, that if you're in that line of work, you may still have access to that individual's criminal record, even though it's being removed from public viewing.
Correct. So prosecutors will very likely be able to see that. There are carve-outs in the statute that lay all this out. But long and short of it is DHR can actually see those when they're doing an investigation, and prosecutors can see them, can see those records to a certain extent.
Now, I'll talk a little bit about the job applications, because this is something that I'm curious about. We talked about this a little bit before we got started here this evening. You and I both went to law school. We've got our law license and everything, but when you go to apply for to take the bar exam and to become a lawyer, you have to fill out these questionnaires, one of which is, have you been convicted of any crimes? And I think they even put on there, regardless of whether you've had the record expunged, like, what advice do you give people who are confronted with those situations where they're being asked those questions?
First and foremost, read the question. Answer the question.
Only answer the
Only
question.
answer
right?
the question. So if they are asking for arrests, maybe you want to disclose, maybe you don't. If they're asking about convictions, you can just read the question. If they're asking about arrests, regardless of expungements, by all means disclose it. I tell people it's better to disclose more than what's being asked than less, because you don't want to come off like you're trying to be evasive of something where you shouldn't have been or you didn't read it right. But functionally, if it's a regular background check, they're not going to be able to see it. So,
especially if we're talking about trying to get your law license and maintain your law license, probably not a good idea to start off by telling them a lie about what your background is.
I just say disclose. If you have questions past reading it, disclose it. But would you have to? Most likely not. It just really depends on how it's being asked.
We're about to close out the show. We got time for one more question. Is there statute of limitations on filing these applications for expungement, or can they be done pretty much any time?
There's nothing in the code that says you have a certain amount of time to do it. Now there are carve-outs in the code that say you have a certain waiting period to be able to file one, but there's no statute of limitations, so to speak, where once you've passed a certain date, you can't anymore.
Great subject matter. Catherine's been an expert on this topic. Really enjoyed having her here this evening, and I think the viewers can take a lot away from the show.
Absolutely. This has been good. I certainly know more about it. Thanks a lot. Really do appreciate it. And we want to thank you as well for joining us here on The Attorneys as we got into another topic. We're going to do it again next week. Make sure you follow us all week long on social media. Stop by again as we have another episode of The Attorneys. Same time, same place next week. We'll see you then.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.